James Comey and his impending salacious media blitz that the media is hysterical about. The New York Post reporting one of the so-called major nuggets in his new book is that Donald Trump allegedly asked a former FBI director to investigate this infamous, completely untrue, unverified Ritz-Carlton, Moscow hookers urinating in a bed story by Michael Steele, the foreign national guy that was paid to get Russian propaganda to manipulate the American voters. So why would a sitting president want to go to an FBI director? I hope you can dispel this if, in fact, he thought it was true. Because the president is saying that's just so not true. Can you find out that it's not true? And can you report that it's not true? Wouldn't you want to do the same? We'll have much more on that later tonight. Now we turn to some other developments, including those surrounding Robert Mueller's overreaching witch hunt. Former Federal Election Commission chairman, his name is Bradley Smith. He's a Republican appointed by President Clinton, is throwing cold water on the notion that Michael Cohen could or should be charged with a crime in connection to this whole Stormy Daniels payment. He wrote the following: when you stretch the law to, quote, get a political opponent, it's rarely possible to return the law to its original shape. As someone who was never a part of the Trump campaign, but instead a longtime employee of the Trump organization, Smith is arguing that Cohen's payment is a perfectly legitimate business move and that any attempt to connect it to an in-kind contribution is an extreme stretch. It doesn't fit. But of course, as we have discussed many times on this program, Mueller and his pit bull, Andrew Weissman, they're no strangers to stretching the law in order to squeeze a suspect. Now, earlier today, President Trump held a routine meeting with Mueller's boss, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. This comes after Rosenstein, finally, after being threatened with contempt of Congress, again, he doesn't want to give anything up that has been subpoenaed and requested by Congress, and an impeachment. Well, finally, he allowed Chairman Devin Nunes and Chairman Gowdy to see the document that started the FBI's so-called Trump-Russia collusion investigation. I'm going to have more on that later in the show. But first, we do have some good news to bring you about the president. I guarantee you nobody else in the media will talk about it. And earlier today, the president actually, in a speech in the Rose Garden, was highlighting something the media will never talk about. It's not Russia, and it's not Stormy. His accomplishments that are improving the lives of the American people, the forgotten men and women that voted in November of 2016.
We've created 3 million new jobs since the election. Unemployment claims are at their lowest level in nearly 50 years. Think of that. Something I'm very proud about. Unemployment rates for Hispanics and African Americans have reached the lowest levels ever recorded. Think of that. For women, the lowest levels in 19 years. So we have really good numbers. And something a lot of people didn't think was going to happen, wages are rising at the fastest pace in over a decade. We're cutting record numbers of regulations. We've cut more regulations in a year and a quarter than any administration, whether it's 4 years, 8 years, or in one case, 16 years. We're also unleashing American energy and American energy independence. We're now an exporter of energy. We're doing 10 million barrels a day. Nobody thought they'd see this. We're cracking down on unfair trade deals. We're taking strong action to secure our border, stop illegal immigration, and restore the rule of law. And we've passed the biggest tax cut and reform in American history.
Make no mistake, in just over a year, the amount of accomplishments from this administration, this is historic. I've never seen the media talk about this. The major tax cuts, the negotiated trade deals, the rolling back of job-killing Obama-era regulations, concessions from China just in the last week on tariffs and intellectual property rights, progress towards actually denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and so much more. And while the media is all too happy to completely ignore all these achievements that actually matter in people's lives, well, we're going to continue to show you what's really happening. As we say, many times on this program, we'll never be the Destroy Trump media, fair and balanced. That is our commitment. We are the only balance, it seems. Joining us now, Fox News contributor, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, NRA TV contributor Dan Bongino. Governor, I want to just get the big picture from you. On the one hand, I'll even scroll the accomplishments of the president because he mentioned them today. but as you see them, it is never reported. Not sometimes, not only once in a while, never. Denuclearization. Putin pulled his ships out of Syria. Looks like he's capitulating. China, intellectual property, all of these accomplishments. Not a single word, Governor. And it's always Russia and Stormy and whatever other bizarre thing this investigation has evolved into.
When I was listening to your monologue, the one thing that really struck me was that there is a consistency. James Comey has been incredibly inconsistent. The media has been inconsistent, as have politicians about Comey, but there's one consistency. They all universally cannot stand President Donald Trump. And that's the one thing that holds true. They thought James Comey was the worst person imaginable. Now that he's written this incredible fiction where he's basically breaking his arm, patting himself on the back, you'd think he was the next Mother Teresa. Now, what changed? Changed was that James Comey now is turned on Donald Trump, and that has the media all in just a complete froth because they're excited about that. But no, they're never going to tell the things that you just outlined in terms of the accomplishment, because it defies their narrative that he's not a capable and competent president. But the record shows that he is.
You know, Dan Bongino, you look at what this evolved into. They didn't find any. We're here because they didn't find any evidence of collusion. I'm pretty sure we would have known about it by now, because they kind of leak everything. Not a little bit. Pretty much everything gets leaked out. So now it's actually moved into Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal and the Access Hollywood tape and worse. And raiding the home of the president's personal attorney to find those issues, not about Russia. At some point, I'm wondering, where is the left in this country? Where are the civil libertarians in this country?
They're gone, Sean. Sean, the media is terrified because they realize Bob Mueller's in deep trouble. Public approval of his investigation is collapsing. People are starting to realize that this is a witch hunt. There was no Russian collusion. There never will be Russian collusion. Trump's not afraid of Russian collusion because there was none. But, Sean, Mueller is deeply conflicted. And what those CNN hacks won't tell you as they attack you is because they don't do investigative journalism. They do propaganda.
By the way, I want residuals. They ran my tape so much today, I want them to pay me. Jeff Zucker needs to pay
I'm
me.
appearing on tonight's show. Do I get some of those residuals too? So I'll take. No, but
I mean,
Sean,
it's like a
he's deeply
rerun of
conflicted.
Hannity. I'm like, if you want my show, you should have bid for it. But, you know.
They're investigated. Here's the crime. The crime is that Trump was spied on without the evidence to do it. You know who vetted that information in the Department of Justice? Bob Mueller's old chief of staff, John Carlin. By the way, you know who's representing Susan Rice as her attorney right now, Sean? In this, when they reached out to her to explain that, Catherine Rumler. You know who Catherine Rumler was? Barack Obama's general counsel.
Unbelievable.
Who also who worked for Andrew Weissman in the Enron case and is friendly with Bob Mueller. Tell me there's no conflict there, CNN. Do your homework.
Great point. Let me ask Governor Huckabee, what would you advise the president at this point? There's two schools of thought, that he fights back or that the president lets his attorneys handle it.
I think let the attorneys handle it. When he's at the podium and when he's at the microphone, he needs to focus on the accomplishments of his administration, and there are many. He's got a great story to tell, and he's the best one to tell it.
You agree with that, Dan, real quick?
Yeah, he's got a story to tell. You're darn right. Those tax cuts alone in the economy are going to be those bread and butter issues. Going to ride him to re-election.
It's unbelievable. The biggest abuse of power scandal in the country's history. Now, when we come back.